I stood at the edge of the driveway, the cracked pavement beneath my sneakers, looking up at the house that built me. The porch still creaked in the same spot near the step. The hydrangeas I planted when I was 16 had bloomed despite everything. And the little chip on the mailbox, the one Dad kept saying he'd fix, was still there. Everything was the same. Except for the key in my hand. It didn't work. I jiggled it once, twice, then tried again. No click. No give. And that's when I noticed it. The new lock. A silver deadbolt where there hadn't been one before. The handle had changed too. Sleeker, modern, not the brass one with the floral plate Mom picked out 20 years ago. I rang the doorbell, heat rising in my chest. A few seconds passed. Then the door cracked open, and I saw her, Amber, my sister, wearing my college hoodie, holding a mug that had been in Mom's kitchen for years, and looking like she had just rolled out of bed in my room. "What are you doing here?" she asked. I blinked. "What am I live here." She didn't flinch. "No, you don't." The fight that followed wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The sharpness of it was all in the words, clipped, cold, calculated. I came back, early from New York. Dad said I could stay here while I job hunt. "This is my house. I live here," I repeated. "No, Ivy," she said. "You paid for it. But Mom and Dad still legally own it. And they decided it was better if I lived here." "Now," I stared at her. "They what?" Amber leaned against the doorframe, like she had every right to stand there. "They said you've been gone too much anyway. Always working, never home. You don't even act like part of the family anymore." My hands curled into fists at my sides. "I've been gone because I've been working 2 jobs to finish paying off the last of the mortgage." "Which I did, 3 months ago." She shrugged. "Yeah, well, you should have gotten it in writing." And then, before I could say anything else, she smiled. Not kindly, not even cruelly. Just smug, like she'd won. And she closed the door. Sat in my car in the driveway for a long time after that. My mind racing through every memory of the past 7 years. It started with my parents needing help with the mortgage after Dad's stroke. I moved back, took a local job, and agreed to pay half. Then half turned into most turned into all. I didn't mind. It was home. And they said, "It'll all be yours one day." They said, "We'll put it in your name soon." They said, "You're the responsible one. Amber's still figuring herself out." And every time I asked about the paperwork, Mom said, "It's just a formality." Well, apparently the formality had locked me out. I didn't go to their house that night. I couldn't. I drove aimlessly, thinking about the way Amber had looked at me. Like I was interrupting, like I was the guest. I booked a hotel and sat in the dark for a while, staring at the ceiling. Then I opened my laptop. I had folders, scans, bank statements, receipts. I'd kept them all, not because I thought I'd need proof one day, but because it felt responsible. And for the first time, I was grateful for how meticulous I'd been. Every payment I made. Every time I covered their property tax when they forgot. Every bill. Every Home Depot receipt for repairs. I had proof. And something inside me, the part of me that had always played nice, always nodded along, always been the good daughter, shifted. Something cracked. And through that crack, something colder leaked in. They wanted to play ownership. Fine, I'd show them what it meant to own. It started with a spreadsheet. No rage texts, no dramatic confrontations. Just quiet keystrokes in a beige hotel room with flickering lights and a persistent hum from the mini fridge. I labeled it proof, because if they were going to gaslight me, pretend this wasn't mine, that I was just a generous daughter with no real stake, I needed something that couldn't be argued with. I listed everything. $37,650. Mortgage payments over 4 years. $4,192. Roof repairs after that hailstorm in 2021 to $150. Kitchen plumbing overhaul $816. Property tax late fees I covered for them $200. The furnace Amber complained about but never touched. It totaled over $46,000. And none of that included the groceries I stocked, the furniture I bought, or the years of time I gave up chasing my own dreams just to keep the family afloat. They always called me the responsible one. I guess they didn't expect that responsibility to come with a paper trail. The next morning, I sent a polite text to Mom. "Hi, we need to talk. Can we meet this week?" She replied 2 hours later. "Of course, sweetie. How's Friday? Just you, me, and Dad. Amber will be out with friends." No apology, no mention of the lock, just a gentle nudge toward pretending everything was normal. Fine. I could pretend too. For now. They chose their favorite brunch spot. A quiet little cafe with ceramic chickens on the shelves and a chalkboard menu that hadn't changed in 10 years. When I walked in, they were already sipping their coffee like it was any other family catch-up. Mom smiled like she hadn't orchestrated the biggest betrayal of my adult life. "Ivy, sweetheart, you look tired. Are you sleeping okay?" I sat down slowly. "I haven't been home in a few days." Dad shifted in his seat. "Amber said you were upset." I looked at him. His hands were shaking slightly. He'd always had a soft spot for me, but now he avoided my eyes. "Upset," I echoed. "That's one word for it." "Ivy," Mom said, voice calm. "You've always known the house was in our name." "Yes," I nodded. "But we also agreed repeatedly that it would be transferred to mine after I paid it off, which I did." Her lips pressed together. "We never signed anything, darling, and I'm sure that was intentional." Silence. I pulled out my folder, neatly tabbed, printed copies, organized with page numbers. I'm not here to argue. I just want clarity. If the house is yours legally, fine. But if I'm not welcome in the house I paid for, then I'll be filing a claim for reimbursement. Here's a breakdown of everything I've contributed since moving back. Dad blinked at the number on the first page. Mom didn't touch it. "That's a lot of money," she said finally. "It's not just the money," I said. "It's the principle." Mom sighed, like I was being dramatic. "Amber needs stability, right now. She's going through a hard time. You're financially fine. You always land on your feet." There it was. The great family myth. Ivy the strong one. Ivy who doesn't need help. Ivy who can take one more hit. "Amber isn't my responsibility," I said, sharper than I meant. "And neither is your mortgage anymore." Mom reached across the table, placing her hand over mine like we were still close. "Can't we just move on from this? We're family." I slowly pulled my hand away. "Exactly. And I need to know. I'm not just being used because I'm the dependable one. I need to know my sacrifices mean something." Mom's expression tightened. "Ivy, you're overreacting." And that was the moment I stopped trying, stopped hoping they'd do the right thing. Stopped clinging to this fantasy that love would override entitlement. They weren't sorry. They were annoyed. "I'll give you until next week," I said quietly. "Either we transfer the deed like originally agreed, or I speak to a lawyer." Dad finally looked up. His eyes were sad. Not because I was wrong, but because I had finally drawn a line. Back in my car, I didn't cry. Not this time. I opened the email app and started drafting a message to a local real estate attorney. I titled it, "Ownership Dispute. Property. Paid by non-title holder Amber might have the key, but I had the receipts, and I was just getting started." The lawyer's office was quiet. Almost too quiet. Like the kind of silence that made you question every step that brought you there. I sat in a leather chair across from a man named Elliot Cross. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes and the kind of calm voice that made you feel both heard and cornered. He glanced through my paperwork like it was a morning newspaper, only pausing to underline a few things. "You weren't on the title at any point?" he asked. "No. But you paid off the entire mortgage?" "Every dollar." He nodded slowly. "Do you have proof of intent? Any messages where they acknowledged your contributions?" I swallowed. "Plenty. Texts, emails, even voice messages. From my mom thanking me for saving the house." He smiled, not kindly, but with interest. "Good. That matters more than people think." Over the next hour, he walked me through a list of things I hadn't realized I was legally entitled to. He explained equitable interest, constructive trusts, and something called unjust enrichment, where someone benefits from another's contributions without offering fair compensation. Apparently, I had a strong case. Even without being on the deed, the combination of payments, verbal agreements, and documentation could land me a formal claim in court. But he didn't recommend going straight to trial. "People like your parents?" he said, tapping the file. "They bank on guilt and silence. So, we start loud, but not public. A formal demand letter, registered, certified, time-stamped." My hands felt icy. "Won't that make things worse?" He looked at me. "They already changed the locks on you. What's worse than that?" The letter was sent 2 days later. In it, Elliot outlined everything. The payments I'd made, the verbal agreements, the timeline, and the demand for either 1, immediate transfer of the deed to my name, or 2, full repayment with interest. We gave them 10 business days to respond. It wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate, and that made it scarier. I didn't hear anything for a week. No calls. No texts. Just the usual silence. Then, the group chat pinged. "Mom, can we please talk as a family before you blow things out of proportion?" Amber. "Seriously, Ivy? You're dragging everyone through lawyers now? For a house?" Dad. "I wish we could have talked this out differently. This hurts all of us." I didn't reply. Instead, I sent a single text. "You had years to talk. Now I'm listening to someone who actually works in facts, not guilt." 10 days passed. On the 11th day, a letter arrived at Elliot's office from my parents' lawyer. They weren't offering the house. They were offering a settlement, partial repayment of what I'd contributed, minus the cost of rent they claimed I should have been paying all along. I stared at the number. It was less than half of what I was owed. Elliot looked at me. "They're hoping you'll take it and disappear." I shook my head. "No," I said. I'm done disappearing. That night, I went back through my records, not just the financials, but everything I'd given up. The job I turned down out of state. The year I delayed graduate school to help Dad with his rehab. The relationship that broke apart when I chose to prioritize family. I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for recognition. For every time they made me feel like my sacrifices were just expected. Amber had always been the loud one, the dramatic one, the one they bent for. I was the one who cleaned the messes, paid the bills, picked up the slack, and they thought I'd stay quiet forever. I met with Elliot again. We discussed next steps, mediation, filing a formal lawsuit if needed, even placing a lis pendens, a public notice of dispute, on the house title to legally block any sale or refinancing. He handed me a folder labeled Pre-Filing Timeline. If we go all the way, he said, we'll need to show the court that we gave them every chance. Good, I said, because I'm done giving chances in silence. What they didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that I had more than just texts and receipts. I had a voice memo from Dad, recorded 6 months earlier, when he'd been in the hospital after his fall. He'd told the nurse, thinking, was out of the room. Ivy's the only reason we still have that house. If we ever lose it, it's because of our own selfishness, not hers. And the nurse, bless her, had her phone running. She'd sent it to me. Said she wanted me to have it in case things ever got complicated. Complicated didn't begin to cover it. I sat alone in my rented apartment that night, playing the voice memo over and over. Not because I needed to hear it, but because I wanted to remember. They knew. They'd always known. And they did it anyway. They asked for a family meeting. Not with lawyers, not through emails, not with settlement papers or timelines, just a talk. Mom called first. Ivy, please, come to the house on Sunday. We'll all be there. We just want to talk, face to face. She said it like she was doing me a favor, like it was generous of them to finally acknowledge my side of the story after months of silence and smug manipulation. I didn't want to go, but Elliot encouraged me. They want a meeting? Let them talk. Just don't agree to anything, and don't go alone. So I brought Morgan, my best friend since freshman year of college, and someone who'd seen my parents' favoritism in full display more than once. She didn't say much on the drive, just gripped the steering wheel like she could wring the tension out of it. You don't owe them grace, she said, as we pulled up to the driveway. Just presence. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. Amber's SUV was parked in my spot. There were new curtains in the front window, different landscaping. They had even taken down the wooden plaque near the porch that said, The Winters Family, established 1991. I had made that when I was 12 in shop class. Now it was gone. Inside, the air smelled like cinnamon candles and strained forgiveness. Mom had set out pie. Amber was already on the couch, flipping through her phone. Dad sat stiffly in the recliner, like he wanted to sink into the floor. Thank you for coming, Mom said, forcing a smile. Let's just get to it, I replied. Amber sighed. Why are you making this a legal thing? Families don't sue each other, Morgan snorted. Families also don't kick their daughter out of the house she paid for. Amber glared at her. Ivy, seriously? You brought a witness? I brought someone who doesn't lie to me, I said flatly. Dad finally spoke. We know you're hurt. We get it. But Amber's going through a lot. She lost her job. She's rebuilding. She needs support. So you gave her my house? I asked, my voice low. Mom looked uncomfortable. It's not that simple. You were never technically on the title. And you knew I paid everything off. She didn't respond. They launched into their version of things. That Amber was struggling. That I was doing fine. That I always land on my feet. That this was a misunderstanding. But when I placed the printed voice memo transcript on the table, the one where Dad admitted I was the reason the house hadn't been lost years ago, the room fell into silence. Dad paled. Amber stopped talking. Mom's eyes scanned the lines. And for the first time since this mess began, she didn't have anything rehearsed to say. I recorded it months ago, I said. I wasn't going to use it. But now that you're painting me as greedy, I'm done playing fair. Amber scoffed. So what? You're going to take me to court and force me out? Morgan leaned forward. If that's what it takes. Mom's voice finally cracked. What do you want, Ivy? Just tell us. What will make this go away? I leaned back in my chair, looked at each of them. Then I answered, calm and cold. I want the house in my name, full transfer, legal, recorded, within 30 days. Amber jumped up. You're trying to steal it? No, I said. I already paid for it. Mom tried to protest again. But this time, even Dad didn't join her. He stared at the transcript in front of him like it was a mirror he couldn't escape. 30 days, I repeated. Or the next letter you get won't be from my lawyer. It'll be from the court clerk, with a lawsuit attached. Morgan and I left without dessert. We didn't speak until we were back in the car. Then she reached over, squeezed my hand, and said, I'm proud of you. I didn't feel proud. I felt tired. Tired of fighting for the bare minimum. Tired of begging to be seen. Tired of pretending this was just a misunderstanding when it had been intentional all along. But under that fatigue, something else simmered. Resolve. They had tried to erase me from the house, from the family. But now I was carving my name into stone. 30 days, that's what I gave them. It had been 17. I marked each one with a red check mark in the corner of my desk calendar like a prisoner counting time served. But I wasn't the one on trial. Not anymore. They were. And if they thought I'd bluff, they hadn't been paying attention the last 7 years, which I suppose was the whole problem. On the 19th day, I received a letter from Amber's email address. Subject line, let's settle this. Sister to sister, I. Stared at it for a minute before opening it. It read, Ivy, I still don't think you understand how much pressure I'm under. Mom and Dad told me you'd never really care about the house. You were always going places. I didn't ask you to pay the mortgage. That was your choice. But if you want, I'll move out. Just don't take it all away. Amber, I didn't reply, because that wasn't an apology. That was fear masquerading as grace. Amber didn't regret what she did. She regretted that I wouldn't roll over. She didn't offer a deed transfer. She didn't acknowledge that I'd paid for everything. She wanted mercy for something she didn't even admit was wrong. That night, I went through old photo albums. There was one of us in front of the house on our first day of school. I was 7, Amber 5. I had my hand on her shoulder. She was grinning. I was not. Even then, I knew. I always had to watch for her. Day 21. The call came at 9:47 a.m. from a number I didn't recognize. It was my parents' lawyer, a woman named Cheryl Lynn, and she was far more professional than the emotional mess that had been brunch 3 weeks earlier. She opened with, "Miss Winters, we've reviewed your documentation and your counsel's demands. My clients are prepared to make concessions." My pulse quickened, but I didn't speak. She continued, measured and smooth. "They are willing to offer a full repayment of your financial contributions, totaling $47,063, plus a goodwill bonus of $3,000. In exchange, you would sign a waiver releasing any and all claims to the property." I inhaled sharply. "Tell me something," I said. "Do your clients still have the original voice memo in that folder I sent?" A pause. "Yes," she said. "We're aware of it." "Then they should know this isn't about money anymore." When I told Elliot, he laughed under his breath. "They think they can pay you off like a disgruntled contractor." "I'm not selling my silence," I said. "I want the title, or I want the war." "Good," he replied, "because I've already prepped the filing." Day 24. The doorbell rang at 6:38 p.m. Morgan and I were eating frozen pizza and watching a courtroom show on mute. I opened the door. It was Dad. He looked older, smaller, like something had caved inward. "Ivy," he said softly. "Can we talk? I didn't invite him in." "I'm not trying to defend what we did," he said, "but I want you to know, I never expected it to go this far." I waited. He rubbed his hands together nervously. "Your mother's digging in. She thinks you're punishing us." "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm protecting myself." He looked up. "Would it mean anything if I said I'm sorry?" My throat tightened. "Not if you're still living in a lie." He left quietly. No shouting, no guilt trip. Just a heavy silence that followed him down the stairs like a shadow he couldn't shake. I closed the door and turned the lock. Morgan didn't say a word. She just handed me a pen and slid the final demand envelope across the table. That night, I printed one more copy of the spreadsheet, not for court, for me. Every dollar, every month, every sacrifice, every betrayal, and on the back of the last page, I wrote a single line in black ink. "Let this be the last time I pay for silence. Day 29. One day before the deadline. I hadn't heard a word. No calls. No emails. Not even another performative text from Amber. Elliot had the court filing ready. All that was left was my signature. The moment I pressed pen to paper, we would officially enter litigation. I'd become the daughter who sued her parents. The villain in their version of the story. The cold one. The ungrateful one. But I was also the one who had paid for everything. That evening, I drove by the house again, just to see it. I parked across the street. Lights off. Engine running. It was dusk, that moment where everything softens, but nothing hides. The porch light was on. Amber's car was gone. The curtains were drawn. And for a brief second, I thought about walking up to that door and trying my key again. Just to see. Just to know if there was still a part of that house that recognized me. But I didn't, because I didn't need that kind of closure anymore. The next morning, day 30, a knock came at 8:12 a.m. I opened the door and found a courier holding a padded envelope and a clipboard. "Delivery for Ivy Winters," he said. "Signature required." I signed. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper, a notarized deed of transfer. It had my name on it, in black ink, stamped, dated, filed. I blinked, reread it twice, checked the notary seal. It was real. There was no letter attached, no apology. No note from Mom or Dad or Amber, just the legal transfer of ownership for the home I had poured my adulthood into, silently, selflessly, and stupidly. Until now. I called Elliot. He reviewed it within the hour and confirmed it. "It's official," he said. "You own the house." I waited for a feeling. Relief? Joy? Triumph? None of it came. Instead, I felt clarity, like fog lifting off a long stretch of road. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call them. I didn't tell anyone except Morgan. I just sat with it, the paper in my hands, the final, undeniable proof that I had won. But the house wasn't a prize. It was a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. 3 days later, I visited. Not as a daughter, not as a guest, as the owner. Amber was there. She opened the door slowly, like she had been expecting something. Maybe a fight, maybe a lawyer, maybe her eviction notice. "I know why you're here," she said quietly. "Then you know what I'm about to say." She nodded. "I'll be out by the weekend." She didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't slam the door, just turned and walked back into what used to be our home, now mine. I stood on the porch for a while after she disappeared inside. The wood still creaked in the bum. Same spot. The railing still had the chipped paint from the time Dad leaned too hard one summer. The wind carried the smell of hydrangeas. I was back. Not as the girl they raised, but as the woman they underestimated. That night, I unlocked the front door. With my own new key, and for the first time in a long, long time, I stepped inside. The house was silent, but not empty. There were echoes, not just sound, memories. The kind that waited behind every door frame, crouched beneath every floorboard, heavy in the air like a song you forgot you knew. The kind that reminded you what you gave, and what they took. I stood in the doorway of what used to be my bedroom. Amber's perfume lingered in the air, something sugary and expensive that didn't belong in a room where I once painted constellations on the ceiling and taped my first college acceptance letter above the desk. The bed was still there, but none of it was mine anymore. She had left behind a box labeled "Donate," filled with framed selfies, mismatched socks, and a notebook titled "Manifesting My Dream Life." On top was a coffee mug that said "Favorite Daughter." I dropped it back in the box, didn't laugh, didn't cry, just moved on. I took the next week off work, didn't tell anyone why. Didn't answer Mom's calls, didn't respond to Dad's "Can we meet for coffee?" texts. I was busy with paint, samples, sanding old furniture, replacing outlet covers, airing out what felt like decades of expectations and guilt. Morgan came over on the third day and helped me rip up the stained carpet in the upstairs hallway. "This," she said, yanking, "a strip-up is better than therapy." Underneath was the original wood, scratched, weathered, beautiful, like me. On Sunday, I found a box tucked into the back of the hallway closet, unlabeled, heavy. Inside were photos, dozens of them, family vacations, birthday parties, holidays, but in most of them, I wasn't there, or I was blurry in the background, or cropped out. Amber front and center, always smiling, always lit just right. There was one picture, though, one I hadn't seen in years. Me and Dad, in the backyard, the day after I passed my driving test. I was sitting on the hood of the old Camry, holding the keys, grinning like I had the world in my hands, and he was looking at me like he was proud. I sat with that for a while. Then I placed it on the mantel, the only photo I let stay. On Friday, Amber texted me, "I left a few things in the attic. Can I come get them?" I stared at the message, then typed, "I boxed everything. It's on the curb." She replied, "Wow. You really think you're better than all of us now, huh?" And for the first time, I didn't flinch. I didn't feel anger or guilt or anything that used to twist inside me when she said things like that. I just turned off my phone and took a long bath in my tub, in my home. By Saturday, the house felt different. Not because the furniture had changed, but because I had. I didn't walk through it like a guest anymore. I didn't tiptoe around its memories. I reclaimed it, room by room, corner by corner. And in doing so, I reclaimed parts of myself I didn't know were still buried in its walls. Still, the final confrontation hadn't come yet. I knew it was coming. I could feel it. The pressure in the air, the tension in the silence between the calls I wasn't answering. Mom wasn't done, and she didn't like to lose. So when I got the email titled, "You owe us a conversation," I opened it. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because the truth was, I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. But maybe it was time. They heard that for themselves. The meeting wasn't my idea, but I agreed to it. Not because I needed closure. I already had that. But because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is let them watch you stand tall in the house they tried to take from you. Mom wanted to meet at the house. Of course she did. She missed control, missed walking into a room and knowing her word would go unchallenged. But this time, she would walk into my space. Not hers. Not Amber's. Not shared mine. I cleaned that morning. Not for her. For me. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table. Sunlight. Streaming through the living room windows, a single coffee mug waiting on the counter. It read, "Just because I'm quiet doesn't mean I forgot." At 3:02 p.m. the doorbell rang. I didn't rush. I opened the door slowly, deliberately. Mom stepped inside like she was still the one in charge, scanning the hallway, pausing at the family photo wall I had replaced with framed documents. One of them was the deed, another was the spreadsheet. A third was a simple quote, "Blood means nothing without respect." "Ivy," she said, letting her purse slide off her shoulder. "This house feels different." "I suppose it should," I said. She sat down on the couch, her old spot, and smoothed her skirt like she was preparing for a church speech. "I want to talk. Not argue, not accuse. Just talk." I nodded. "Then talk." She started with the usual. "We didn't mean for it to feel like betrayal. You were always the independent one. We thought you didn't care about staying here." Every sentence carefully crafted to blur responsibility, to make it seem like no one was at fault. That maybe this was just a misunderstanding between people who love each other. I let her finish. Then I said, "You didn't just forget me. You replaced me." She looked up, startled. "You knew what I gave. You knew what I lost. And when it was time to honor that, you gave it away like it was nothing." Ivy, No, I said, voice firm. This isn't a two-way misunderstanding. This is a one-way betrayal. And you don't get to rewrite that. She went quiet. I didn't sue because I wanted revenge. I sued because I wanted proof. Proof that I wasn't imagining it. That I wasn't just sensitive or overreacting like you always told me I was. Her eyes glistened. I didn't stop. You raised me to clean up after everyone else. And when I finally stood up, you called me selfish. I was scared, she whispered. No, you were ashamed. Because deep down, you knew you picked the child who needed you more, not the one who gave you more. For once, she didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't deflect. She just sat there, surrounded by the echoes of what she'd broken, staring at the daughter she could no longer guilt back into obedience. I miss you, she finally said. I nodded. But I don't miss that version of me. I walked her to the door. No hug, no tears, no false promises. Just two women, once mother and daughter, standing on opposite sides of a truth too long ignored. She turned back on the porch and said, "If you ever want to come back to us, I'm already home," I said, and I closed the door. In the days that followed, I didn't think about whether Amber was angry, or if Dad had finally spoken up, or if Mom would go tell everyone how cold I'd become. I didn't need to defend myself anymore, because I had nothing left to prove. The house was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't haunted. It was healing. I replaced the couch, painted the front door yellow, built shelves in the office and planted lemon balm in the garden. And every morning, I sat by the kitchen window with my coffee, looking out at the same yard I once felt erased in. Only now, I wasn't invisible. I was unapologetically visible, rooted, real, reclaimed. They gave her the house, but I took back what was mine, and in doing so, I finally gave myself what they never could: peace.